The 2024-2025 NFL playoffs have finally arrived. After 18 weeks of regular season football, this is where it gets real. With the Lions and Chiefs on bye, we've got 6 total games to cover. Last week, I went 11-5, bringing my final record for the 2024-2025 NFL season to 185-87. That means that this season, I predicted 68% of games correctly. In this video, I'll be predicting every wildcard game with score predictions. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop a like and subscribe if you're new. Subscribe to take just a second, and it really helps me out. Thank you, and let's get started. 5 seed Los Angeles Chargers versus 4 seed Houston Texans. First wildcard matchup sees the Chargers taking on the Texans over in Texas. The Chargers last made the playoffs in 2022, where they famously blew a 27-0 lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars, back when Brandon Staley was the head coach. This time, however, Brandon Staley isn't here to ruin things. The Jim Harbaugh hire was absolutely brilliant, and he has turned this organization around. Fellow former Michigan coach and new defensive coordinator Jesse Minter has also been pivotal to the Chargers' success, turning their defense from 24th ranked in terms of points allowed per game in 2023 all the way to the number 1 team in the league in that category in 2024. Justin Herbert has also had arguably the best season of his career. Sure, the raw numbers aren't eye-popping, but when you look deeper, it's clear how good he really was. This was his highest graded season per PFF with a 91.7 grade. He had a career high 7.7 yards per attempt, a career high 6.1 big time throw percentage, and an absolutely diabolical 0.595 interception rate. It on average took him 168 pass attempts to throw 1 interception, and he was doing all this with a receiving core consisting of a second-round rookie in Ladd McConkey, drop merchant Quentin Johnston, and Josh Palmer. Now, to be fair to McConkey, he did have a great rookie season with 1,149 yards and 7 touchdowns, and Quentin Johnston did have a better second season, including an amazing 13 reception, 186-yard game in Week 18, but he did still have an 8.3% drop rate, which is even worse than last year, and his contested catch rate still isn't that good, but at least he's shown signs of improvement. J.K. Dobbins also had a nice bounce-back season with 1,058 total yards and 9 touchdowns in 13 games. Another fantastic piece on this Chargers team is someone who is not talked about enough, and that's Joe Alt, the Chargers' 5th overall pick in last year's draft. He's allowed just 20 pressures on 602 pass blocking snaps. He held TJ Watt to just 1 pressure on 25 snaps, and he held Max Crosby to just 1 pressure in his first ever NFL game. And like I mentioned earlier, the defense was absolutely amazing. This Chargers team is very complete and is a tough one to play. The Texans unfortunately might just be the worst playoff team this season. They only got in because their entire division is about as full of shit as the Taco Bell restrooms. And while they have the same record as they did last year, this is an objectively worse team. They regressed from 13th in points per game last season down to 19th, and 11th in points allowed per game down to 14th. They brought in a ton of players in the offseason to hopefully take this team to the next level, but that just hasn't happened. Stephon Diggs only played 8 games before tearing his ACL, and Tank Dell only played 14 games before literally tearing everything in his knee. Nico Collins also only played 12 games. The offensive line has taken a huge regression, and Bobby Sloak's play calling has been called into question multiple times this season. But at the forefront of it all is CJ Stroud. Was CJ Stroud's second season worse than his first? Absolutely, and you can't really argue that. Is Stroud as bad as everyone on the internet makes him out to be? Absolutely not. His turnover-worthy play percentage has actually decreased from his rookie to sophomore season from 2.9% down to 2.4%. His big-time throw percentage is practically the same, 4.3% his rookie year, 4.1% this year. He's been better with his legs, going from 4.3 yards per attempt in his rookie year to 4.5 this year. No, he hasn't taken that next step, but I don't think he's had a massive sophomore slump like other people try to say he had. He's been dealing with a lot of injuries to the players around him, and again, Bobby Sloak hasn't exactly helped him out either. All that being said, the Texans still aren't great, and they don't match up well against the Chargers. That defense is going to absolutely tear the Houston offensive line apart, and with Nico Collins being the only reliable receiver on the field, he's going to be double-teamed, and Stroud is going to be under a lot of pressure. On the flip side, the Chargers offense is well equipped to handle the Texans defense. The Texans predominantly rely on their edge rushers to get pressure, and the Chargers have 2 great tackles, the aforementioned Joe Alt as well as Rashawn Slater, to handle those guys. Herbert will have plenty of time in the pocket to pick the Texans defense apart, and in the end, despite being on the road, I have the Chargers beating the Texans 30-23, winning their first playoff game since 2018 and sending the Texans home. 6 seed Pittsburgh Steelers versus 3 seed Baltimore Ravens. For the 3rd time this season, the Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Baltimore Ravens, and these 2 teams are trending in complete opposite directions. The Steelers have lost 4 straight, while the Ravens have won 4 straight. The Steelers started the season with Justin Fields at the helm, and he played solid, leading them to a 5-2 record. However, Russell Wilson took over in Week 7 against the Jets, and from then until Week 14, they won 6 out of their next 7 games. However, in their next 4 games, all against playoff-caliber teams, plus the Bengals, they lost by a combined score of 109-57. Wilson hasn't been playing particularly great ball, and it's clear that if George Pickens isn't playing his A game, the Steelers have nobody else to turn to. Overall, I think Russ has been good, but he hasn't been that good. Najee Harris had another 1,000-yard season, but had less than 4 yards per carry, and their next leading receiver besides George Pickens, who had 900 yards, was Pat Freiermuth with just 653 yards. The defense has been good as usual, but they have allowed these playoff-caliber offenses to basically have their way the past 4 weeks. I'm really concerned about this Steelers team, and while anything is possible with Mike Tomlin, remember that he hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. On the flip side, the Ravens have been cooking these past 4 weeks, beating their opponents by a combined score of 135-43. Lamar Jackson has had what I believe to be the best season of his career. He had a career high in passing yards, yards per attempt, touchdowns, interception rate, turnover-worthy play percentage, big-time throw percentage, and pressure to sack rate. I mean, a 41-4 touchdown to interception ratio is absolutely ridiculous. And of course, he put up nearly 1,000 yards on the ground as well. Derrick Henry was also a massive signing for this team, giving Lamar Jackson a great running back for the first time ever. Henry had an absurd 2,114 yards from scrimmage and 18 total touchdowns. It would have been the best running back season in the league if it wasn't for Saquon Barkley existing. Zay Flowers had his first 1,000-yard season, and despite starting off slow, Mark Andrews ended up leading all tight ends in touchdown receptions with 11. And while they had their moments, the Ravens defense was overall a solid unit, finishing 9th in points allowed per game. Kyle Van Noy finished 4th in sacks with 12.5. Kyle Van Noy finished 4th in sacks with 12.5. Unlike the Steelers, the Ravens are absolutely rolling right now. Being division rivals, these two teams obviously played each other twice this season, back in weeks 11 and 16. Their first matchup in week 11 saw the Steelers barely beat the Ravens 18-16, but in their second matchup, in week 16, the Ravens absolutely demolished the Steelers 34-17. The score is 1-1, and this is the most important matchup between these two of the season, and I have the Ravens winning 24-17. I think it will be a little lower scoring, as the Ravens won't have Zay Flowers, which is a big hit to their passing attack, but in the end, the Ravens have proved that they can hang with and beat the best, and the Steelers just haven't. Baltimore, you're moving on to the divisional round. 7-seed Denver Broncos versus 2-seed Buffalo Bills. Now this was a matchup that was not expected at all. The Broncos were projected to win just 5 to 6 games, but instead, they managed to claim the 7th seed with a 10-7 record, despite finishing 3rd in the AFC West. For starters, Bo Nix had a great rookie season, finishing with 3,775 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. His college strengths continued to show in the NFL, as he had just a 1.9 turnover-worthy play percentage. He showed growth throughout his entire season, starting off slow, like most rookies, but got better and better throughout the year. His rushing ability was also a large factor, as he finished with 430 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground, over 8th and 9th respectively among all quarterbacks. He also pushed the ball downfield more than I thought he would, and was actually good doing it, finishing 9th in PFF passing grade on throws 20+ yards downfield, with a 93.4 grade. He was definitely a great fit in Sean Payton's system. Courtland Sutton had his first 1,000-yard season since 2019, and Marvin Mims Jr. had a great last few weeks and could be a big piece moving forward. But to me, the most impressive part about the 2024 Broncos was that defense. They went from 27th in points allowed per game in 2023, the same season where they allowed 70 points to the Dolphins back in week 3, all the way down to 3rd in 2024. Zach Allen and Nick Bonito had breakout seasons, with Allen finishing 5th in the entire league in pressures with 75, and Bonito finishing 3rd in the entire league in sacks with 13.5. And of course, there's Patrick Surtain, who had an absolutely incredible season that quite frankly puts him right up there in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Vance Joseph has done a great job with his defense, and overall, the Broncos have been very good this year. But of course, there's the Buffalo Bills on the other side, and you have to start with Josh Allen, who, despite losing Stephon Diggs in the offseason, still had an incredible season. He had a career-low 2.6 turnover-worthy play percentage, so stop saying that he's a turnover machine. He also had a career second-best 7.7 yards per attempt, and of course, he added 12 touchdowns on the ground. He's the only quarterback to beat the Chiefs starters this season and has made a really good case for MVP. Khalil Shakir had a really solid season, and James Cook was also really good, finishing tied for the league lead in rushing touchdowns with 16. This all led to them finishing as the second-best offense in terms of points per game. Their defense was also pretty solid, finishing 11th in points allowed per game, Greg Rousseau had a pretty good season, finishing with a 13.7% pressure rate, and Christian Benford was also pretty good, allowing just a 72.3 passer rating when targeted. I think that despite not being the 1 seed, the Bills are the best team in the AFC right now. The Broncos are a fun story, but it's going to be really hard to beat this Bills team. The key to beating the Bills is containing Josh Allen and not letting him go Superman mode, and that's easier said than done. Unfortunately for Denver, their season ends here, and Buffalo takes this one 31-21. This just may be Buffalo's year as long as they put everything together, and this game is a great start. 7 seed Green Bay Packers versus 2 seed Philadelphia Eagles. With the AFC playoffs done, let's move on to the NFC, where we start with a matchup that I don't think will be as lopsided as some people seem to think it will be. The Eagles are kind of limping into the playoffs, as this will be Jalen Hurts' first game since Week 16, where he left in the first quarter with a concussion. Through his 15 full games though, Hurts wasn't exactly phenomenal, but he wasn't bad either. He just didn't throw the ball that much. Yeah, he had less than 3,000 yards, but he had 8 yards per attempt, tied for his career high, and he did have another 14 rushing touchdowns, but this definitely wasn't an amazing season from Hurts. He had a career low 3.7 big time throw percentage, and a career second highest 3.4 turnover worthy play percentage. Unfortunately, he hasn't really managed to replicate his MVP caliber 2022 season. However, he was overall solid through the air and was good on the ground, and doing just enough is perfectly fine when you have a 2,000-yard rusher in Saquon Barkley, who had the best running back season since Derrick Henry in 2020. 2,005 rushing yards and 2,283 total scrimmage yards in 16 games is absolutely ridiculous. If one of your friends is a Giants fan, maybe check on them. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were obviously good, so was the offensive line, as usual. But what I really want to highlight is the defense. Specifically Zach Bond, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean. Mitchell was pretty locked down all season, allowing just an 87 passer rating when targeted, with his most notable performance being in Week 11, where he held Terry McLaurin to 0 catches and 0 yards. Cooper DeJean proved that he's not a safety, allowing an 82.2 passer rating when targeted, and had the second highest PFF run defense grade among corners, only behind Mike Hilton. But the biggest breakout was Zach Bond, for sure. Bond was absolutely incredible this season, finishing first in the entire league in PFF coverage grade and overall grade among linebackers, and he made the first team All-Pro, which is absolutely insane. The Eagles are one of, if not the most complete teams in the entire league, and they're a scary one to play. The Packers are really good as well, and it's not often that an 11-6 team finishes third in their division, but that's just how things went this year. They did go just 1-5 in their division, however, losing to the Lions and Vikings twice, as well as the Bears, but Malik Willis was playing for most of that game, so I don't put too much stock into it. The only other loss was, ironically, to the Eagles back in Week 1. Jordan Love did have a slight regression from last season, but he was still really good, and the free agent acquisitions of Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney were both huge for this team. The defense obviously was better because Joe Barry wasn't there, and the whole wide receiver by committee thing has pretty much worked once again, although Christian Watson tearing his ACL isn't going to help matters, though it's not like he was very good anyway, at least from a consistency standpoint. Overall, the Packers are a very solid team that met expectations but didn't really exceed them. I think this game is going to come down to who can run the ball better, and that's the Eagles through and through. Eagles take the win 24-20 and move on to the divisional round. 6 seed Washington Commanders versus 3 seed Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've got another rematch from Week 1, and this game has the potential to be the best one of the week. Both of these offenses are playing at an elite level, with both quarterbacks having different but elite seasons. Jaden Daniels and the Commanders surpassed every preseason expectation, finishing 12-5 and second in their division. Daniels himself was amazing, throwing for 25 touchdowns to just 9 interceptions, along with 900 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. He had a 3.9 big time throw percentage to a 1.7 turnover worthy play percentage, and led the Commanders to the 5th best offense in the league. The defense also wasn't that bad relative to their overall talent level, which was nice to see, but please, never let Benjamin St. Juste on the field ever again. The Commanders are entering the dance on a 5-game win streak and are a very dangerous team. On the other side, the Bucs have won their division for the 4th year in a row. Baker Mayfield had the best season of his career with 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns. Yeah, he threw 16 interceptions, but 41 touchdowns is 41 touchdowns, and the Bucs still had the 4th best offense in the league. Bucky Irving had an incredible rookie season, managing to finish 8th in scrimmage yards with 1,514, and has definitely taken Rachaad White's job. And it may have taken until the final snap of the regular season, but Mike Evans hit 1,000 yards for the 11th straight year, becoming the first player ever to have 11 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to start their career. Todd Bowles managed to coach a top-half defense as well, which is pretty good considering the talent on that side of the ball isn't exactly amazing. Like I said, I think this game could be the best one of the week. Both offenses will be clicking, we have another rendition of the Mike Evans versus Marshawn Lattimore beef, which is always fun, and both of these teams have good stories and are easy to root for, but in the end, I'm taking the team that has both the coach and quarterback with more playoff experience, and that's the Buccaneers, with a final of 30-28. Could I see the Commanders winning? Absolutely. But as Captain Rex famously says, experience outranks everything. 5 seed Minnesota Vikings versus 4 seed Los Angeles Rams. Our final wildcard matchup of the week, where the Vikings take on the Rams in yet another rematch for the regular season, where the Rams beat the Vikings 30-20. Said Vikings had an opportunity to get the 1 seed against Detroit, but they completely shit the bed. The entire offense was unprepared and sloppy. Sam Darnold was sailing balls higher than the International Space Station. Jordan Addison had 1 catch on 6 targets for 0 yards. Justin Jefferson dropped a key pass in the back of the end zone. The offensive line let a practice squad defensive line get constant pressure. Kevin O'Connell tried to beat Dan Campbell and go for it on 4th down, but his balls simply don't have the magical powers like Mr. Dan's. I actually think the Vikings defense played really well, but eventually they just got worn down, and by the 4th quarter, they were dead. After all, it's hard to win when you go 0 for 4 in the red zone. I talked about the Viking season as a whole a lot last week, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but I think this team has been way better than everybody thought. Sam Darnold still had an amazing season despite the bad final game, and the defense was phenomenal as well. As for the Rams, they did an up and down year that was full of injuries, but managed to play their best at the right time, winning 3 out of their last 4, their only loss in that span being a 5-pointer to the Seahawks starters with Jimmy G at the helm. However, ever since that 44 bomb on the Bills, the offense has scored a combined 44 points in 3 games. I'm obviously ignoring week 18. That is a little concerning, but ever since giving up 42 to the Bills, their defense has allowed just 24 points, and that's why they've won 3 straight. Again, not counting week 18. Jared Verse and that defensive line have been super impressive, and while they're no Aaron Donald, they're getting the job done. This game is going to be way different from the last time these two played. For one, the Vikings are going to have Blake Cashman, meaning Kyron Williams likely won't be able to do the same things he did to them last time, and the Vikings are going to have to scramble to prepare for Puka Nacua because they found out he was playing 4 hours before game time. The Vikings also aren't coming off a 4-day rest after facing the Lions. It's an 8-day rest this time. I think that Kevin O'Connell and this Vikings team have learned from last week's mistakes and are going to be a lot more prepared this time, and while it will be close, the Vikings are going to end up winning 27-24, giving Kevin O'Connell, as a head coach, Sam Darnold, and Justin Jefferson their first playoff wins. But that's it. Those are my 2025 wildcard round predictions. Here's what the playoff bracket would look like if every single one of my picks were correct, though the chance of that happening is about the same as the Raiders winning a Super Bowl next year. But where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe, and that's it for me. See ya and enjoy a wildcard weekend.